Seemingly out of the blue, Oasis was announced on X in October of 2024.
Oasis. Okay, this is the talk of the town. Everyone's mentioning this. Everyone's posting about this.
This game isn't real. This is all AI generated.
This is the new AI Minecraft game.
According to them, it's the very first playable game fully generated in AI. But it's not an original game, of course. It is a full simulation of Minecraft. As a relatively passive Minecraft fan, this really caught my interest. The ease of playing it on browser made myself, and many others, at least give it a try. And while it's obviously not quite the greatest gaming experience I have ever had, it was definitely more than just a novelty. The gameplay itself seemed to capture this weird feeling I have about Minecraft. When playing it, those memories came flooding back to my mind, especially some I had from playing Minecraft Pocket Edition Lite on my iPod over a decade ago. There exists this general and currently very popular idea of Minecraft nostalgia and its scariness, shown by all the discussion about old versions of the game on YouTube and horror projects as well, and for a brief moment at least, Oasis really fit in with that theme. It was just pretty fun. Of course, there's more than just the low render distance and glitchy visuals to discuss here. While Oasis is, at its core, a mix of a tech demo and an AI showcase, the Minecraft community has, as they often do, surprised us with what they can do with it. Trying to beat the game, finding out exploits, and creating awesome things with seemingly no proper tools to do so are just some of the things that have popped up. That's why I wanted to make this Iceberg today, to show off a bunch of fun facts, but also lesser known things about this game. In and of itself, Oasis might not fascinate you, but what the community has done with it certainly should. With that said, I'll skip a lengthy introduction and an explanation of the Iceberg chart format, as I think YouTube is past that by now. This is an original Iceberg created by me with some help from Piss Dimension Phil. I will say that if you enjoyed this video, you should subscribe to the Seed Butter channel to stick around for more icebergs and fun content, as well as helping me reach 100,000 subs. For now though, load up your favorite game to play while you listen to this video, get comfortable, and let's get going with the very first tier of this iceberg. Oasis, Etched, and Descartes AI. Oasis is a Minecraft clone which replicates the game using generative AI. It was created in a joint effort between two companies, Etched, a computer hardware startup, and Descartes AI, an AI group. The project started in 2022 when a co-founder of Etched met a co-founder of Descartes. The name Oasis originates from Ready Player One, and it was the VR world used by characters in that series. In that book and movie, it stood for Ontologically Anthropocentric Sensory Immersive Simulation. This fascinating demo put both of the groups in the spotlight. The game is still a demo running on NVIDIA GPUs, but will eventually transition to Sohu, an AI chip under development by Etched. This will help them release a full version of Oasis and potentially other future games. Trailer. On October 31st, 2024, Etched released a 25-second long trailer of Oasis. It was a fantastic introduction to the game, but many people think, myself included, that the trailer looks a whole lot better than an average experience is usually when playing the game. The trailer pretty cleverly uses short segments of very controlled gameplay, where the character generally keeps the whole scene in frame most of the time, making the game stay stable. Although it does show a clip of the player looking up and back down, fully changing their environment, but even that looks pretty smooth. On the whole, it was a pretty good trailer. 5-minute timer. Each playthrough is only limited to about 5 minutes to allow people to take turns. In the future, as processing becomes more efficient, this limitation should probably go away, but for the foreseeable future, it's here. For me, it doesn't really detract from the experience because you can't really store things in your quote-unquote world anyway. It also turned into kind of an interesting feature, adding a difficulty element to any of your builds or speedruns, both of which we will of course talk about later. However, what's kind of interesting is that at one point it was a full 15 minutes long, probably cut down to let more people use it. Starting images. To play Oasis, you have to start from a specific image of Minecraft. You can either pick from several provided on the website, or, interestingly enough, upload your own. Uploading your own can facilitate getting to the end or nether much faster, or being in an area that would otherwise be difficult to visit. Discord. There's a Discord server for the project called Descartes AI. It's a super cool source for project updates, bug fixes, support, and community in general. It's also where many of the contests are hosted. When you load up the game and see those contest opportunities right there, you can go to the server for people's submissions, which are super cool. In general, it's a really neat place to see cool gameplay, and it's where I found a ton of awesome things for this Iceberg. So I highly recommend you check it out if you're curious, and if you do play a lot and record your gameplay, you can head over there to show off any discoveries that you make. Next frame prediction. Next frame prediction is ultimately what drives Oasis. The easiest way I feel it can be explained is that the AI guesses what should come up in the next frame of gameplay based on what it currently sees. It was trained on millions of hours of Minecraft footage, so it uses that repertoire of experience to imagine what you'll see next. So if you're not moving, your field of view stays the same because the AI understands that things in Minecraft don't really change without you interacting with them. But start to move, and it will start to predict. That's how you can leverage blocks to create new things. If you have something like wood, Oasis might use that next frame prediction to make a village or a house. If you come across what looks like a mob, next frame prediction suggests that it should move. An interesting factoid about next frame prediction that we'll talk about a little bit later is anything orange. If you see something orange, next frame prediction can lead to the generation of a nether environment, as if all the information you have is this one frame, it is a valid assumption to suggest you're looking at lava in the nether, if that's all the information you have to go on. The game doesn't store memory, which is why if you do a full 360, the environment is completely different. Every single thing you see is a prediction based off what you previously saw, and not any established logic or code. Challenges. In the entry about the Discord server, I mentioned challenges. These challenges, or contests, are put on by the Descartes team, even including cash prizes. Previous contests have included building houses or making the best looking build when starting from a custom world image. If you're interested in doing it, you should record your gameplay and post it on the server under the contest channel. There's also smaller challenges like punching the Ender Dragon or acquiring specific items. Mobs. One of the absolute craziest things about Oasis is how mobs spawn and act. Mobs in this game are super weird in general. They often look amalgamated, or are born out of or turn into regular blocks. I often see sheep just turn into wool blocks or even a bed, depending on how you look at them. You'll often see common mobs spawn in, but there are some recordings of more rare mobs popping up too. In my experience, they'll often turn into something else or disappear very quickly, so if you manage to get a hold of one and want to keep it, you should try and keep it in frame the entire time while observing it. There are also some quirks about specific mobs. For example, cows have this weird behavior where they multiply very quickly, growing into huge swaths of beef. People have theorized this has to do with how passive mobs like these are often seen in Minecraft footage in farms that house hundreds of them. So naturally, when the AI was trained on that footage, the idea of cows not being alone or in groups of 1, 2, or 3, and instead huge numbers of them, was ingrained. It's pretty cool. Some mobs have actually never been observed yet, and the community is actively hunting for proof of them. Dreaming. When reading articles about Oasis or hearing anyone describe it in general, the term dreaming comes up all the time. At first, I really got tired of hearing it, especially in the context of gaming journalism, because I just thought it was something that people were repeating. But when I really think about it, it makes a lot of sense. This has a lot in common with dreams, at least in my opinion. Punching blocks can take forever, sort of like how punches in dreams are extremely slow and weak. Your speed can decrease, or you can start falling or flying out of nowhere, often something that happens in dreams. The low resolution kind of feels like dreaming too. Often I feel like I dream like I don't have my contacts in, which is a really weird thing, maybe that's just me. But the weightlessness, sudden changes in strength and speed, blurriness, haze, and hallucinations do all feel dreamlike. Spin reset. Part of next frame prediction means there's no memory involved with this game. Aspects of your world aren't stored anywhere. So when you look away from something, it's gone forever, or at the very least, it will be changed. So if you don't like your environment, one way you can change it is by using what I'd call a spin reset. It's literally just spinning and seeing your world be different. It's fun to play around with. In my opinion, the speed at which you turn can also affect how radical the change is. Looking straight up and then down also accomplishes the same effect. Item switching. Both while in your inventory and when actually on the ground, items can switch into other items. Blocks are very fluid, changing into similar looking things. I often see this with anything wooden, fences especially. My theory with wooden items in particular is that items which have more similar items to themselves change more frequently. Very distinct items, or items which don't have similar counterparts, can't change because Oasis can't confuse them with anything else. But things like wood, which have dozens of varieties and can be found in many shapes and sizes, can be interpreted and reinterpreted very quickly. Specific connections. When playing this game, there's sort of an art of manipulating objects to generate new ones, or even entire environments, biomes, and dimensions. One of the most common connections, which we'll talk about in its own entry, is honeycomb. It can be used to transport to the Nether, and is one of the quickest ways of doing so. You can also use wood and paved paths to generate villages. Sandstone and endstone, two blocks that are very similar visually, can turn into each other as well, so taking advantage of sandstone is a great way to generate end environments. Nether portals. Functioning nether portals are possible to make and use in Oasis. They are a much less efficient way of getting to the Nether than by just using a reddish block and letting it take up your screen, but you can still pull it off. Any blackish mass can also form a portal, and you'll see portal effects, which are super cool. You'll see that blurry haze effect that you see when entering a portal. They don't always actually generate the Nether or work, which I think is pretty funny, and you can even get stuck in them, ending in this purple and black zone. But if you're lucky, you'll actually pass through just like a Nether portal. Taking damage. You can't really die in the traditional sense in this game. Nothing should stop you to force playing. We know that you can take damage, and you can take damage and lose all your hearts, but nothing special follows it. The community theorizes that we might be able to see the death effect, where you see red and sort of zoom out directionally, like when you die in normal Minecraft. A big reason we cite for suggesting this is possible is the portal effect that we see. We know the game can comprehend visual effects on screen when something happens to you. We just haven't seen it yet. Placing entire rows. A building technique I've come to use occasionally is placing one or two wooden blocks and then swiping the camera down the line to generate more. It can be used to build the foundation of a house really quickly. I can't say specifically why this happens, but I have a theory. If you think about Minecraft, and take wood for example, it's a block that, more often than not, touches another piece of wood. If you have a wooden house and you look at it from one end, the only blocks that don't touch other wood blocks are the two on the end. So in a 10 by 10 house, for example, only the 4 corner blocks have ends like this. For that reason, the game sometimes assumes where there is one wooden block, there is more, on average. I know that's a bit of a weird explanation, but you can take advantage of this idea to build very quickly. Achievement. Fascinatingly, you can actually get achievements in Oasis. As you might imagine, they're just like the rest of the text in the game, where you don't often make out specific words, but you can clearly tell this is an achievement. Boss bars. In a very similar manner to achievements, another thing you can encounter are boss bars. They're super common if you end up in the end, and the same way you can't make out text in achievements, you can't make it out here. I might be making this up, but I personally think you can make out 2 separate words here. Like, these appear to be 2 different capital letters, which makes sense obviously, as this is supposed to be the Ender Dragon. Maybe that's just me, but I think I sort of see it. Skyblock. I was really curious to see if a skyblock world would be possible in Oasis, and it's been tried, but unfortunately, it went about as swimmingly as one might expect. A player named Event Soot did a bit of research into this, having a few interesting observations. Often, the AI would turn the background into water or snow, so you actually had to start with a picture of the Skyblock Island at night. However, as you can see in this video they posted, it doesn't last too long one way or another. The AI will simply start to build the world surrounding the starting island. I found it pretty cool. I mean, it makes sense that this would be impossible, but it would be cool to see an update where the AI does a better job with maintaining the void instead of instantly trying to fill it. Flying. By either falling or occasionally looking straight up into the sky, you can begin to fly. It's quite janky, but occasionally it will work. People have also managed to get fireworks into the game and use them occasionally as well. It's not super reliable and doesn't last long, but it can happen. Honeycomb. Honeycomb is one of the most important blocks in Oasis, on account that they are reasonably common and have a lava-like appearance up close. By tricking the game into seeing lava, you can usually trick it into creating the nether. Honeycomb nether transfers are much more efficient than trying to enter the nether officially by using a portal. Honeycomb transfers can also take you to new dimensions in this version of the game, but we'll talk about those soon enough. Honeycomb can also generate and propagate abnormally, like in this video. Some have suggested that the relative uncommon appearance of honeycomb in the overworld could be why the AI so frequently assumes that blocks of that color must be lava, thus generating the nether. But that hypothesis isn't perfect, as there definitely was enough honeycomb in the training data used. It's probably just much simpler to interpret the color itself. There's also the chance that you can generate a full honeycomb dimension as well. But again, we'll talk about that later. Chat. You can actually get the chat to appear in Oasis. If you start with an image that has chat opened, it'll usually work, but it can also happen on its own, perhaps even in conjunction with achievements. As you can imagine, the text is unreadable, except for that example I just showed. I think that right there has the capacity to be one of the creepiest things about this game. Just the idea that even though no one is with you, and that the laws of this world are not what we're used to in Minecraft, but that still, someone, something, is trying to make contact with you. Creepy. Forzy. Forzy is a YouTuber who uploaded 2 extremely impressive videos of Oasis gameplay that got super popular. In the first, he travels to the nether using honeycomb, and then randomly, at the end of the video, finds blocks which form a stronghold, but he loses it pretty quickly, without traveling to the end. It was still really important, however, because it helped propel the idea of speedrunning in the game. Though we haven't seen someone beat Oasis in the traditional sense, speedruns are now often a race to get to the nether, the end, or both. It also sorta introduces the concept of using multiple tries in a single speedrun, as in that video, his world stops after the first 5-minute timer expires and he starts again. His second video is a lot more interesting though. Forzy quickly builds up a house using that wood placing technique that I mentioned earlier. But when you look at it up close, something fascinating occurs. All of a sudden, the yellowish wood turns into an end island. It doesn't last very long, but I think it may have been the first recorded instance of generating the end in that manner. This version of the end quickly turns into something called the Piss dimension, which we'll talk about soon. But regardless, it demonstrated a fascinating connection between wood and endstone, which could hopefully be leveraged in future speedruns. The rest of that video is also neat, showing off a cool portal sequence. Forzy hasn't uploaded since November 7th when that video was posted, so maybe he'll get back after it soon. Strange item names. As we've touched on, text generated in Oasis, like any AI text, is rather finicky. Sometimes you can make bits of it out, like in the chat and in boss bars, but not often. Item names seem to have it the worst though, probably because in Minecraft footage, item names change much more rapidly as people move through their inventory. This contrasts, say, boss bars and achievements, because when those texts pop up, they tend to remain static. There are some recurring patterns in the naming conventions of blocks, however. One example is dirt, which tends to be named do-dick, or however you would pronounce that. F3 menu. The F3 menu, or debug screen, can randomly pop up while playing. It doesn't have any connection with actually pressing F3 though, it just appears to be random. Tooltips. Just like the F3 menu, tooltips have been known to occasionally pop up as well. Actual Oasis series. Something that popped up a bunch while I researched this is an actual Minecraft video series on YouTube called Minecraft Oasis by iHasCupcake, going all the way back to 2013. It's popular enough that you might run into it yourself when looking into the game, so I thought I'd point it out here. It had 186 uploads, which is definitely a lot. I'm certainly not going to watch it all, it's well over 100 hours long, but I'm curious if anyone has watched it, tell us some fun facts about it in the comments below. Teleporting. Teleporting is another common phenomenon in the game. It could be defined in a few different ways. For example, if you suppose that the creatures or structures disappeared when you look away from them counts as teleporting. But it has to do more with yourself. Sometimes it's clear that you've just done a spin reset or something like that. But other times the changes are so drastic or sudden that it really does begin to feel like you've actually teleported. Depending on what you're looking at, once it starts changing, it just keeps going, and you basically teleport to an entirely different place. Block mobs. One of the most interesting things I observe when playing is when the game confuses a mob for an actual block, and starts to shift them one way or another, either by turning a mob into a block or a block into a mob. My favorite example is this right here, where a structure looks a bit like a villager's face. It leads to a lot of these abominations. We'll visit some a bit later, but it is a common phenomenon in my opinion. Either by playing with the angle of how you see the mob, or even just letting them decay naturally, they'll all morph into weird sorts of things. Empty rooms. Another phenomenon from the game is the generation of these empty rooms. Often you'll find these structures that honestly just look like tombs. Dark rectangular spaces containing nothing. As always, like anything in the game, they'll often decay into something radically different very quickly. But just for a moment, you'll be trapped in these empty spaces with no exit. They give off a backroom sort of vibe. Strongholds seem to do this a lot, not generating actual strongholds with mazes and such, but instead these dark, empty spaces. This probably just has to do with how the game interprets that structure, but I couldn't tell you the specifics behind it. Piss dimension. At last, we have arrived at the entry where I may discuss the long-fabled Piss dimension. The Piss dimension, also known as the yellow dimension, or perhaps simply just Piss, is the name given to a phenomenon in Oasis. The Piss dimension is a super common thing to experience while playing Oasis. There are a ton of different ways to enter the Piss, but a super common one is by being in the end, as endstone eventually turns yellow and can encompass your entire screen. I denote this phenomenon endstone piss decay. However, one does not require exclusively endstone to create piss. As an Oasis, piss can come from anything. Seriously, there's actually people speedrunning it now. The piss dimension is super weird because it doesn't always seem to resemble actual blocks, but rather just swaths of yellow. Not only that, but you can get trapped in it, and it can be very hard to leave. It can also spawn as just a wall or a floor, for example. It's a lot easier to get trapped in the piss dimension if you allow the piss to take up your whole view. So if you see the piss start to generate, you can try and look away towards any of your screen where something else is visible. This has become a huge joke in the community too. If you join the Discord server, for example, you'll see it everywhere. Remember, there is no gold, there is no honeycomb, there is no sand, there is only piss. Discord priority. There was a time where you could get priority skipping the line to play faster, that is, by joining the Discord server. I don't think this is actually available anymore though, as the lines have gotten a lot shorter in general. Copyright. AI copyright law is something that people do not want to touch right now, and that kind of has to do with the legal profession as a whole. Law is a conservative profession, and innovation always works many steps faster than the law, leaving it to catch up. And precedent is extremely important in law, where the result of one case can be followed for years and years, even decades to come. Radical changes in law are few and far between. So a lot of people are kind of waiting around for precedents to be set with regard to AI, and that leaves a lot of questions for the time being. One of the biggest is the ownership of the data that AI models are trained on. Sure, it was publicly available, but much of it was sourced on YouTube. So do they have a claim to what the AI knows? What about the millions of creators who made the Minecraft footage? What about Microsoft in general, who has in fact stated that the build of the game is unauthorized? Furthermore, can it even be considered a copyright violation when Descartes themselves aren't actually executing any stolen code, but instead just making visual representations of the game? We'll have to see how the future unfolds and how these questions start to get answered, as I'm genuinely curious to see how this will shape out in the coming years. But one way or another, it will not be fun, and will probably be rife with argument. Smoke particles. Smoke particles can occasionally appear near animals, as if you've killed them. Sometimes too, they just show up. I think the idea of it just popping up is super creepy, and I wonder why the game generates them. Are there creatures that you can't see? Or is this the game's way of interpreting our own playing behavior? Does this signify just how many animals have been killed indiscriminately by Minecraft players? Does the game assume that a trail of death follows us close behind? Perhaps. Nether portal effect. I've mentioned this and shown it a few times now, but nether portal effects are one of the only documented visual effects we can see on screen. Probably because in Minecraft gameplay, this is a lot more common than, say, potions or death. There's definitely a hunt for whatever other effects we can find though, so if you do manage to encounter one, you should definitely upload it to the Discord server. ARG. Piss Dimension Phil, who once again I need to thank for their help on this iceberg, started an ARG about Oasis. It appears really fascinating, seeking to add some genuine lore and story elements to some of the things we see in Oasis, including, in particular, the Piss Dimension. I won't theorize on it too much here because I do actually want people to check it out, and it's very short and still developing, and you can find it linked in the video description, so go check that out after this video. It's like a lot of investigations into the backrooms and other similar projects, but all framed in Minecraft, and I do think it's super cool. It's ongoing, like I said, so once more, make sure to check it out. Minecraft PE Lite. From the very start, this game reminded me so much of Minecraft PE Lite, a game I can't even play anymore because I can't figure out the password to my original iPod Touch, but also because it's a real hassle to load up a build of that version. But there was a lot that I felt these versions of Minecraft had in common. For starters, one thing few people remember about Minecraft PE Lite is how you couldn't save any progress. Your world, your build, everything was gone when you closed the app, just like in Oasis. I actually remember locking my iPod with the app open in an effort to keep whatever world I was working on alive, which worked like 50% of the time. Another thing about Minecraft PE was that you played this pseudo-survival creative mode. There were mobs and you could take damage, from what I remember, but you didn't gather resources. You just had an inventory full of blocks that you could place infinitely. There was also this super limited render distance, leading to a sort of fog that accompanied the game. Playing Minecraft Oasis feels like my ancient memories of Minecraft PE Lite. I couldn't tell you why, but the idea of Oasis looking like a dream or a memory just fits so perfectly with how I remember Minecraft PE Lite, and I'm curious to see if anyone else remembers it that way. Body horror. An expansion of what I was talking about earlier with mobs and blocks is the concept of body horror in general, which I think is a huge creepy theme in this game. The video I showed previously, where we have what appears to be a giant villager head growing out of a building, surrounded by fluid and sloppy creatures pretending to be normal. Strange humanoids we can come across, who at close inspection turn solid or even just disappear. Chickens with no heads, or with 20. Cows that multiply en masse. What we see here is ultimately body horror at its purest form. Grotesque creatures with no place in Minecraft, and yet are right here. They're some of the scariest things about Oasis, in my opinion. Let me know your creepiest encounters with anything like this down below. Backrooms. An instant, obvious comparison that one can make with the Piss dimension is, of course, the backrooms. There's no legitimate connection between Oasis and the backrooms. I mean, there does exist some backrooms Minecraft content, but I can't imagine there would be nearly enough to actually affect what Oasis understands about the game. But it is an interesting coincidence. Some of the ways that you can just slip into new places is a lot like the backrooms too, or how you can just fall out of nowhere. Dementia. Another word like dreaming that I see thrown around a ton to describe Oasis is like having dementia. The game not having memory is almost like forgetfulness, getting lost and ending up in places you don't belong, not being able to recognize faces of the people you love, not being able to read text, falling, getting hurt but not knowing why. I genuinely feel like, with Minecraft of all things, we've gotten a legitimately creepy glimpse at what life like that could appear to be. People have gone as far to compare it to Everywhere at the End of Time in that regard. Compiling all these ideas together actually made me come up with what I think is one of the few ways this tech could actually be used in video games. I don't think AI in this capacity is the future of gaming, despite Descartes and Etched claiming it to be. And I can't imagine this technology being pushed far enough that it could generate a fun game, but hey, it is going fast. But what I do think it could be used in is limited qualities in games. You know how, for some reason, tons of games have these dream sequences where you do platforming in like a stormy place with torn up pieces of ground below you, floating in the air? Like somehow that's become a theme that transcends all genres of gaming? I think we could see this technology implemented in some way like that. Imagine a controlled segment of a game where you step into a new place, a new dimension, take a drug or something like that, and you're dropped in a place like this, which uses next frame prediction, with a basic objective, like encountering someone or something. It could be very interested in limited doses, I think. It also could be used to represent a character going through some sort of mental decay or something, just like I talked about right before. The fog. One of the creepier parts of this game that I personally let my imagination run wild with is this fog out in the distance. The game will often make it look like there's a fog just a ways in front of you, and it moves fluidly, changing anything it touches. It's honestly just a visual thing, but I do think it's kind of creepy, and it reminds me of render distance limitations in older versions. First, containers. Containers often don't work quite right, either with too little or too many slots, for example, on top of them sometimes being visually messed up. Sometimes chests and other containers get conflated with the inventory or crafting menus, as shown here, which makes sense as the pop-up screen where you see item icons are sort of similar visually, so I do get it. Beating the game. Beating the game has not yet happened, or been proven at least. By reaching the end or starting from there with a custom image, you can sort of see the end dragon. And in fact, there was actually a challenge by Deckard to punch it, which someone did. However, the dragon usually turns into something else very quickly, so no one has had the chance to kill it yet. Does that mean it's impossible? Well, no, not necessarily. There are constant new discoveries in Oasis, and we're surprised every day by what the people in the community discover and come up with. That said, I find it pretty unlikely the end dragon could be beat without decaying. I don't think you could use beds to kill it, for example, and I think we just wouldn't have enough time. Even if you could keep it in frame perfectly for a few minutes, I'm just not sure it would work. I think it's possible it might just die on its own, or that we'd maybe see bits of the explosion from when that happens. But what would happen after that? Would we actually see the end credits, or the screen that happens after you defeat the dragon? Who knows? But maybe, just maybe, we'll see in the time to come. Speedrunning. We've talked about speedrunning on and off, and there are definitely fun speedrun categories for Oasis. When talking about beating the game, we naturally have to talk about speedrunning. I do think it's theoretically possible, and even likely to happen eventually, and that there will be some way to generate an Ender Dragon death. It might require brute forcing hundreds of custom images, but it could happen. And if it can be beat, it can be speedrun. I'm curious to see when an actual speedrun will be uploaded to YouTube, and how else the speedrunning community will push this game. At the very least, we'll definitely see some more Piss Dimension runs. Herobrine. Throughout this video, you might have been inspired by a bunch of things you wanted to try loading into Oasis, or things that might come up. And of course, you probably thought of one of the most mysterious things in Minecraft, being Herobrine. People have tried loading up Oasis with both close-up images of Herobrine and the original image, which usually leads to him instantly disappearing because he doesn't take up much detail in that photo. But that isn't the end. There can exist creatures in Oasis. Entities which only show up for a little while, then turn into nothing, much like normal mobs. Players perhaps, but perhaps something different. Are these just the interpretations of photos of players by the AI? Or are they something more? Something intelligent, perhaps? Something that's been lurking in Minecraft this whole time, something which is using a new iteration of the game to try and contact us. Who knows? But what's super fun is that, just like when we were kids who didn't know any better playing Minecraft in its infancy, people are still seeing things in the corners, things that confuse or surprise them, maybe even frightening them. And maybe some people are actually seeing legitimate Herobrine sightings. And the AI can't perfectly conjure him, but it can get pretty close if you're unlucky enough. Could you imagine how fascinating it would be if the game just put him in with actual code just to terrify the hell out of us? That would be hilarious. New dimensions. The Piss dimension isn't necessarily the only thing we might discover. Remember the April Fool's snapshot where there were unlimited dimensions? Oasis is kind of like a look into that. Adjacent to the Piss dimension is the Honeycomb dimension, for example, where you're just surrounded by honey. There's also what some people have come to call the Sludge dimension, defined by a sea of pink blocks surrounding you. I think the discovery of new dimensions in Oasis is once again not only possible, but likely. Honestly, one could even argue we've come the closest to seeing the Aether dimension in Oasis, as you can often find yourself up in the clouds like this, encountering weird structures which look like old ideas about what the Aether might look like. In its own way, it feels like its own dimension. Drop in the comments below if you think you've found a new one yourself. Humanoid entities. We talked about Herobrine specifically, yes, but he isn't the only one you might run into. Occasionally, and frequently when you start with an image of a player character, Oasis will present these strange creatures which walk upright, just like you, until they morph into something else or just die. I haven't come across one of these naturally yet, but they're one of my favorite types of sightings. They're just so weird and creepy. The idea that you could encounter someone else in this AI, some other player character, is fascinating, and the discoveries of human creatures are always super cool. Well guys, that just about wraps up this video. This was super difficult to make, not because there wasn't enough material to talk about, but because I had to stop myself from just rambling on more and more. If I added everything I wanted to be here or that could be here, the Iceberg would never have gotten finished. I'm not going to act like Oasis is the future of Minecraft or gaming, but it is super fun, and it's super interesting to explore it. It's awesome to see that things are actively being found and searched for, and it's a fun hunt to be a part of. So much of why I recommend playing this is that every time you load up the game, there's a legitimate chance that you could be the first to find a new mob, or complete biome, structure, or just something really cool. It's such a thrill, and I enjoy being part of that community, and also keeping an eye out for what other people discover. I really do think in the future of Oasis we'll get some crazy things. Maybe as wacky as actually beating the game, finding Herobrine, or maybe even some never-before-seen creatures with their own unique behaviors. I hope you had a good time with this video today. If you did, you absolutely can thank me by subscribing to the Seed Butter channel so that you can stay tuned for media theories, analog horror coverage, and of course, more icebergs just like this one. I also encourage you to consider subscribing to my Patreon if you're willing, as Patreon members get exclusive updates, early uploads where possible, and a custom thank you at the end of the video. Besides that, I do read every single comment that I get, and I'm curious to see what things you've encountered with Oasis. So, let me know down below. With that all said, thank you, and I hope to see you next time.